Hi everyone, Ms. Kinross here. Welcome to this video of multiplying with decimals. In this video we'll learn to multiply decimals by whole numbers or decimals by other decimals. So let's get started. When we are doing this, we have a 4-step process to multiply decimals. The first step is to make an estimation. So when we are looking at our equation, we would make an estimation by normally removing the decimal points or rounding to the nearest whole number and say, what would it be if I was doing the whole number by the whole number? And that will give us a good idea of saying that our answer is going to be close to whatever the estimation is going to be. So that's step number 1. We then solve the multiplication algorithm, and I'll go through how we do that in just a moment. It's a little bit different to normal, but it follows the same process. The only step is when we add our, the only thing that's different is when we add our decimal point in. Our third step is to place in our decimal point into our answer based on the estimation. And our fourth step is to count the number of decimal places in the question to double check the answer. So we will go through this in clear detail with an example. Okay, so this is the only time I will ever say these words. So listen carefully and then completely forget it for every other unit. So the only time I'm going to say it, we are going to ignore the decimal points. It sounds a bit strange. Never do I say that. It's the most important thing when we're adding, but now in this multiplication, we are going to ignore them, which means we're going to set up our algorithm a little bit differently, and we're not going to have our 6 underneath our, we're not going to have the 6 underneath the 2, sorry, it's just going to be in the far right column. So have a look. It's almost like we're just going to be looking at whole numbers here. So it's almost like we're doing 234 times 6. So we ignore the decimal point or decimal places, and we focus on having our 6 just here in our ones, in what would be the ones column if it was a whole number. And so it's toward the right-hand side of our equation. Then, so that was the first thing we're going to do. Step number 1, we estimate. Okay, I've got a little bit more than 2 and I'm multiplying by 6. So our answer is going to be somewhere between 12, which would be 6 times 2, or 18, which is 6 times 3. So we're estimating our answer will be between 12 and 18. So we've done that. So let's give estimation a tick. Next step is we solve. So we're solving the algorithm just as we would with whole numbers. So we would say 6 times 4, which is 24. So I put down my 4 and I carry my 2. We then have 6 times 3, which is 18, and we add the 2, which is 20. So I'm going to put down my 0 and carry the 2. Notice how I'm not putting in any decimal points at this stage. We then have 6 times 2, and we're adding the 2, which is 14. So our answer there, we've got 1404. So we've solved. We don't have a decimal point yet. So let's do the solve and tick. Now we insert our decimal point based on the estimation. My estimation was that it was going to be between 12 and 18. So we're looking at where I could put my decimal point. I could put it before all of the digits. That wouldn't be between 12 and 18. I could have 1.404. That's not between 12 and 18. 14.04. That sounds pretty good. 140.4. Too high. 1,404, way too high. So our decimal point goes in to make it fit for our estimation. Our last step, let's give that one a tick. Our last step is checking. The way that we check is we count the number of digits that come after a decimal point in our question. So here we've got a 3 and a 4 coming after the decimal point. In this factor here, we don't have anything after the decimal point. So we have 2 digits after a decimal point. So our answer should have 2 digits after a decimal point. So in this particular case, our decimal point is lined up underneath. It's not always going to be that way. So we'll look at an example next that is a bit different. So our answer is 14.04. Let's look at one that involves some long multiplication. So here we have We've set up our long multiplication as if we would have with whole numbers, so we've ignored the decimal points, so they're not lined up. Here you can see they're not lined up one on top of the other. So when we're doing whole number multiplication, what I always see people forgetting to put our 0 down here because we're multiplying by 10, or in this case we're multiplying by, we'll be multiplying sort of by 60. So in that case, put the 0 down first. I'd always recommend the moment that you do your drawing of the algorithm, put your 0 down so you don't forget it. Okay, my first step is to estimate. I've got a little bit more than 6 and I'm multiplying by a little bit more than 2. So similar to last time, my estimation is that it's going to be probably in the teens. It's possibly, it could just get to about similar to 3 times 6 because that's a little bit more than 6 is what I'm looking at. But I'm going to guess it's going to be quite similar to my last one as an estimation. Okay, we then solve. 3 times 4 is 12. Carry the 1. 3 times 1 is 3 plus 1 is 4. I'm ignoring all decimal points. 3 times 2 is 6. In my next one, I've already got my 0 down there, so I don't need to worry about that anymore. 6 times 4 is 24. Carry the 2, so I'm going to cross out the 1 that was already carried. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 2 is 8. So the 8 comes down, and 6 times 2 is 12. Okay, now we need to add these up. So I've got 2, 8, 6 plus 8 is 14, carry the 1, and I've got 3. Okay, so now we've got 13482, or if it was a whole number, 13,482. Based on my estimation, where am I going to put the decimal point? It would be here to make 13.482. So I always like to just double check by saying I could have 1.3482, I could have 13.482, 134.82, just to really make sure that I'm comfortable with my positioning of the decimal point. But I'm quite happy saying 13.482 because it is the closest to what I would expect as an estimation for something a little bit more than 6 multiplied by a little bit more than 2. So I've put in my decimal point, and that's when we do our final check. We count the number of decimal places. I've got 1, 2, 3 decimal places after a decimal point in the question, so I should have 3, 1, 2, 3 in my answer, and that's how we would double check that. Okay, and we'll tick off our check. And in summary, so big summary here, we don't line up the decimal points, and that's only for multiplication. So I don't want you to think of that any other time, just when we are multiplying decimals. Always put the number with the most digits on the top of the multiplication algorithm so that underneath will be the one with with a smaller number of digits. And we would use our estimation, so don't forget to estimate to place the decimal point in the correct place. And we count the number of decimal places in the question across both of the factors, and that's how many we will have in the product or the answer. Okay, so that is how we multiply with decimals. Please ask questions if you've got them, and I hope that we have a bit more of an understanding. Thank you very much.